The tech landscape of early 2026 is defined by three dominant forces: the rise of the agentic economy, the escalating US-China tech rivalry, and the search for real-world utility in a post-hype Web3 market. For business and technology leaders, the conversation has moved beyond abstract future casting. They are asking urgent, practical questions. For example, how will autonomous AI agents reshape business models, and what infrastructure will they run on? As the US and China build parallel tech stacks, where do global companies place their bets? And what is the sustainable long-term value of digital assets now that the speculative frenzy has cooled? Yat Siu sits at the precise intersection of these three themes. His core thesis that digital property rights are a fundamental necessity is no longer just a philosophical argument. He presents it as the essential plumbing for the coming agentic economy. His company, Animoca Brands, is not just a Web3 investor, but a strategic player navigating the geopolitical chessboard from its headquarters here in Hong Kong. We have Yat Siu with us today to cover these three themes. Yat, thank you for being on the show. First of all, you grew up in Vienna during the Cold War, and you have said that crossing checkpoint Charlie as a child shaped your entire worldview. Can you take us back to that time and explain a little bit how right now being in Hong Kong, doing what you're doing, has evolved from that point on?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit of a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. I grew up in Vienna in the 70s and 80s. My mom was a musician, and there was a time where she was working at the eastern side of Berlin, at the Komische Oper. And that's also the reason why I speak German, because I basically grew up over there. And sometimes I would visit my mom, and she was at the eastern side of Berlin. And I would cross the border. And it was really a strange feeling, although even back then when you were in Vienna, you would actually cross the border into Hungary, for instance, or you go to Budapest. Actually, the same thing, a similar experience where they would not just look at you, but when you basically cross the border, if you're in a car, they would look underneath the car, right? You have people with machine guns, all the stuff that you see in those spy movies is actually really happened. But of course, back then, things weren't kind of normal. This was the norm. This was not something that we thought was weird, except when you go to the other side, you would see, the supermarket, well, the market as it were, and you'd basically have, cans spread out literally 1 meter apart from each other. And while I didn't fully comprehend what it really meant, I knew that this was not the world I wanted to be in, and I think this understanding of what true extreme forms of socialism really means. And I think, again, often this is where the West conflates things, because what they've experienced as communism is very different what, basically Chinese people have experienced in their version of communism, which is actually much more capitalist, perhaps more capitalist than most of the world, right, which is a different topic. But that was sort of shaping the worldview, and what does it mean like to be in a world where you don't have freedom? What does it mean to be in a world where you don't have property or the rights to property? And I think today, fast forward a little bit, having worked in Europe, then having worked in the US, and then coming to Hong Kong, my father's from Hong Kong, so I had permanent residency so I could work here. I didn't realize, again, it's more of a happenstance. This was in the 90s. I set up one of Hong Kong's first ISPs, Internet Service Providers. I sort of saw different forms of extreme forms of capitalism as well, right? In other words, going from Europe, which is a socially democratic place, to America, which is an extremely capitalist place, going to Hong Kong, which in the 90s and 2000s was hyper-capitalist. I often quote it as sort of, Milton Friedman's sort of wet dream in terms of how you have a system that is entirely based on just capitalist values, but we didn't even have social security. So when I first came to Hong Kong, there was no MPF. MPF was established, I think, maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s, right? Which meant people didn't even have a social safety net. I mean, that's crazy to think today, right? So you get the different extremes. And in a way, you still see this today in Hong Kong. You still see 70-year-old senior citizens carrying over the trash, right? Which is also not okay. But then you have the other extreme where basically people are sort of against anyone who has wealth, right? Which is becoming more and more of an issue in Europe. So it's helped me shape the thinking. Now, when I started to encounter what happened in blockchain and Web3, we're already in technology a fair bit. We came to realize that this was a way in which we would actually own our digital property. So our thesis around digital property rights started to develop. And it's a very simple sort of thesis, which is to say, well, property rights gave us wealth in the physical world. And where is most of the wealth being generated today? It's actually digital. Who owns our digital property? It's all the big platforms, Facebook, Google, Apple. We're renting them. And we don't even think we're renting it. Every time we post something on Instagram, every time we're sharing something on TikTok, we're actually enriching their algorithm. We're making them more powerful. And we get likes and we get social credit, but we don't make any money from this. And today, it's even more pertinent because all of that data we're giving is essentially fueling the AI that is taking over the world and making these companies ever more powerful. And yet we as users don't get anything for it. So in a way, we're constantly delivering free data to essentially the users, to the platforms, and we, the users, get nothing for it. And so that was the thinking around, wait, how could we change this? How can we truly own our digital property? Blockchain technology was a solve.
Absolutely. So now in 2023, with all these trends moving super fast, what are some of the patterns that you are noticing that a lot of people in business and corporate world are not seeing yet?
The biggest pattern is, of course, this is a recognized pattern. Everything's becoming more digital. That's clear. This has been going on for the last 20 years. However, the big movement right now, when you talk about digital, when you talk about what we used to call the metaverse, or maybe still call the metaverse, when you talk about blockchain, tokens, the whole sort of, cryptographic technology, our pattern that we're seeing is that everything we've built over the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years really wasn't meant for humans. It was meant for machines, right? And all the technology, including Bitcoin, was really the POC for the machine economy. So to this date, it remains difficult for a user to use a MetaMask wallet. They're used to classic fiat. And if you think about the legal system in the whole technology of blockchain and smart contracts, was this idea that code is law. Right? But humans don't operate with code as law. If someone steals your Bitcoin, you still call the police, right? You still want the judiciary to help you, because under the human construct, it doesn't work this way. But under a machine construct, it does. And so all those codes and bits and everything that you see, the smart contracts, is much more sort of not just legible, but understandable and provable, basically, in a machine economy. And I think a lot of people miss the point because they try to divide blockchain and tokens separate from AI, but they're so intertwined. Now, so I sort of asked a survey to people in the room, and most of them do not use crypto, and that's fine. But I asked them, how many people of you will think you'll use an AI agent in the future? Almost everyone raised their hand. And then I asked them, how many think it'll be between 3 to 5, maybe 2/3, 5 to 10, maybe the remainder. The point being is that somewhere between 5 to 10 agents is the minimum number, and we think probably more. I have over 40 agents today. So if that's true, every person who's online today, which is around 6 billion plus, is going to have anywhere from 30 to 60, maybe 100 billion agents. Where do you think they're going to live? Are they going to live in a centralized platform? We hope not. And the reason why is because the next layer is going to be agentic commerce. In particular, sort of agent-to-agent commerce. We get so used to this idea, to talk about patterns, around sort of removing the middleman. And removing the middleman is what we've done with the internet. Right? We've removed a classic physical middleman for the digital middleman because it's less expensive. He reduced that cost overhead. What's even less expensive? Direct. If I could actually do business with you directly. But the scaling and the discovery doesn't work for humans because we don't think in that kind of speed and we're unable to. But an agent doesn't have that problem. So meaning we're going to disintermediate the classic platforms because agents can do business with agents directly at essentially, for us, the equivalent of light speed as far as we're concerned, right? And they're going to do it 24/7. When the whole Iran war, sort of started, right? Basically in classic Trump fashion, it happened just before the weekend, right? So markets couldn't react, but the crypto markets were reacting. People were essentially able to trade and buy, digital commodities because the market was 24/7.
You've touched upon the transaction. So agents are ultimately going to completely revolutionize the way we buy.
Disintermediate the current platform.
Absolutely disintermediate. And also we can start thinking about so many ways, like advertising. Who are you advertising to? Not a human. You don't need to advertise to a human anymore. You need to advertise to an algorithm. Because algorithm is going to, your AI agent is going to present you option A or B or C, not the whole spectrum of 100,000 options, right? And so advertising, marketing, sales, communication, everything is going to be evolving very quickly. But when it comes to transactions itself, again, looking at my business, so painful. PayPal's, Stripe, the percentages that they take for any transactions, not just 2.5%. We're talking about, I don't know, the exchange rates. If your account is, for example, in Hong Kong dollars and you're transacting in US dollars, you end up with 5 to 8% transaction fees. We all agree this is robbery. This is robbery.
Well, speaking of robbery, most recently Apple told Patreon that if they don't basically switch all of their creators to pay the 30% to Apple, they will deplatform them in November this year. And Patreon, by the way, is, as far as I'm concerned, I think of Patreon as creator charity. Like, this is not even a business in itself, right? So you
just support a creator.
Yeah, support a creator, give them literally a donation, and you basically want your 30%. I mean, that would, you talk about robbery. I mean, this is like mafia.
Yeah, but today on Instagram, like again, talking about Instagram today, and it depends on jurisdiction for our listeners around the world, but let's say in Hong Kong, I launch an Instagram advertising. And if I launch it from Instagram and I pay, let's say $100, they take, like Apple takes 30% cut. So I pay $130.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that there is also that, let's call traditional mafia, right?
Yes, exactly.
That does not really want, right? They are sitting there as godfathers and they basically control the flow of currency, the flow of business, so to say. I mean, they're not going to go down without a fight. So the two questions are sort of connected. First of all, agents are coming for sure. Will that be only big tech powered? And number two, the flows, obviously nobody wants to lose that money. How to move forward with all these obstacles?
So first, and I do want to sort of make one point around building agents. I actually think that everyone will have an agent, and you will no longer need to be an AI expert to build agents. And what I mean by that is, when you think about what's now possible for an agent to program stuff, the issue that people have is not, can I tell my agent to make something for me? Because actually you can do that. And it's no longer just a case of, hey, I'm using sort of, Cursor, or I'm using Replit or something like that. Literally the agent, in Animoca Minds, I'm just saying, hey, integrate basically Duffel for API or give me a flight service. And they can literally build a customized dashboard for you that basically manage your travel service, literally like your mini travel agent. But the issue most people have is they don't know how to ask the question. Because we've been so trained to search for stuff. One of the geniuses of sort of ChatGPT when it came out was it wasn't just that it was really good AI at the time, with the LLM. It was just much better search. And it came in an interface that you knew, oh, I ask it a question and I get a better answer, right? What we're not used to is giving it a task and saying, come back to me. So what agents are doing now is, I'm probably as productive as ever, and I'm probably busier now than before, because I have agents coming to me asking for decisions, which is different. When you have an interface where you're asking the question, it's not about decision. You know what you want, and you're asking the question. Here, they're basically like, oh, I need to survey this research on some market stuff, or some product or some marketing insight. And they literally come back to you and give you one insight. And then 6 hours later, they come back, oh, we found something new. And then 3 hours later, they might say, oh, did you look at this, right? So basically, it's like an employee that's giving you feedback and input, right? But you need to know how to ask the question. You need to say, hey, I'm looking for this. I'm interested in where the market is, and you have to give it context. You have to say, because I want market share, or because I want to grow in China, or I want to grow in Hong Kong, or whatever it is. You have to talk to it like an employee, and people aren't quite used to that at the moment, right? That's part of it. But once you know how to ask a question, you're basically just off to the races, right? And we're so good at this point as a technology overall that you just have to prompt it. The image I often have around startups when you look at entrepreneurs, like the US is like the hero cult. Right? If you are a successful entrepreneur, front cover, here's the guy, it's about the individual. It's individualism. He changed the world. Even though he had a whole team behind him, it's about the guy, right? It's always a story about
everybody knows him by name.
Everyone knows him by name, right? Whereas in China, you do have that a little bit, but it's, often when you hear them speak, they thank their country, they thank their people, they thank their team, right? In fact, in Asia, it's much more of a collective spirit, shall we say, right? And I think that translates down as well into the rest of the culture to feel like, well, I'm building something, then I have some obligation to sort of, return something to the nation I built it in. There's a sense of that obligation. So I think there's a philosophical difference here as well, which I think also means how you build technology and AI and tooling will also come from that mindset, right? Also, I think in China, it's hyper competitive. Down to the core. I mean, you know this, of course, incredibly well. People totally misunderstand China. Because they look at China and think it's Russia. State-owned,
state-directed, state-invested companies that are competing amongst each other.
Yeah, it's nonsense, right? They have no idea what they're talking about because, they still look at sort of, China, and they look at the sort of, CCP and look at the communist word, And in their mind, communism is Russia, which is not really communist either, frankly speaking. But the point is just that they have this whole wrong perspective around what that means. China is more capitalist than probably most of the world. The competitive is not only within businesses, but it's also within industries themselves, within state, cities.
Yeah.
I mean, they compete with each other for prominence, right? Which is how they provide funding and grants and support, right? So it's an entire ecosystem that really is, I think, unrivaled in that sense, right? And that's actually fueling it. Where does the money come from? It doesn't just come from China top down saying, I like this, let's put money into that, right? It comes from basically local state enterprises competing with each other for essentially the ability to, climb the ranks as well, as it were, right? So there's a lot more competition there, and then Europe has none of that. So they even have, unfortunately, they have neither U.S. or Chinese competitive edge, which means unfortunately Europe is really in trouble, I think. But that's a different topic. So between that sort of creates this environment, but it also means that the risk of that danger, like you can be more dangerous in America, you can't do that in China, right? And I think that's the edge that America still has. You can create that disruptive technology that could challenge government, which is absolutely not possible in China and shouldn't be, right? For China is all about harmony and stability. US, harmony, stability, what's that? I mean, in a way, right? They live for that disruption. So there's something unique about America. And so I think the world needs that. Because if we didn't have that, then all of the crazy innovations that have come out of America, that have influenced the world, and of course, caused a reaction in China to say, oh, we need that too. And it's not the government. It's entrepreneurs in China saying, we need that, right? And they're all building and competing and then basically advancing that, right? I mean, electric self-driving cars came from America and China just made them so much better. I mean, as an example, right? So there's all these elements around there that I think sort of benefit each other. But of course, you have two nations, incredibly powerful. There's this clashing element. But they're also so intertwined.
So then we are at our last question. It is 2030.
Okay.
Where is Animoca brands and where's the state of the world?
Well, I mean, again, for us, we hope obviously we'll continue to grow. It has been a rocky road. Our industry has been going up and down. We expect to be a publicly listed company at that point, but let's see where it goes. At that point, we expect RWAs to have become, multi-trillion-dollar asset base. We expect billions of people to have been onboarded into Web3, but not directly, but through their agents. We expect essentially agents to be commonplace. Because we're talking 4 years from now, but it's progressing super fast, right? And we certainly hope that our agents or agents in our portfolio are going to be amongst the most impactful agents that are used by everyone. And of course, hopefully, today we have many unicorns on our portfolio, but we hope to have many, many more companies that are building an impact. And finally, I would say, in a world where we have digital property rights, I hope that we will have onboarded billions of people to have digital ownership. And from that, generate value. Not just the fact that they have their data access, that agents are making money online, that they have a stake in what they say. And I think, people talk about, we're hitting the one-person billion-dollar company. Well, that's one way to look at it, right? And I think we're already seeing the evolution of that with AI. But actually, what I'm much more interested in, what I think will happen, maybe not in 2030, but in the years to come, right, is that we're going to have billion-dollar companies owned by millions of users, right? So meaning from a stake perspective, right? And that's what excites us, right? Like if you think about Bitcoin and Ethereum as an example, right? It's owned by millions of people who have helped it grow and have had to share in that stake, right? But still, it's the blockchain community. It's relatively small compared to the rest of the world, right? And this experimentation we did with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, where you can democratically sort of decide what goes with the protocol. Well, humans were not super efficient on this, but maybe agents can change this, right? The point is, now we have a framework that humans tested, but agents can execute around a system where we could co-own, a network, maybe worth billions, but owned by tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people who share in its value and contribute to its value. That could be powered by AI, for instance. We expect those to really sort of evolve, probably by 2030, we'll have some very good examples. We needed blockchain technology to show what we could do with the early forms of DAO. We needed agents to get to this point. The two converge. And we're going to have new kinds of companies. I think we are no longer going to have just companies. We're going to have basically these decentralized autonomous organizations that are governed essentially on chain.
Definitely a very exciting version of the future, the version where we have decentralized assets, where we have decentralized, hopefully, tech stacks all around the world, where we have a lot more diversity, a lot more ownership, a lot more free time as well with agents, a lot more freedom and creativity.
So we have freedom and creativity. I'm not sure about free time. What I mean by that is that I have never been as busy and
as now with 40 agents.
Because I have agents coming to me saying, what do you do, what do you do, right?
Well, you just got yourself a team of 40 people reporting back.
Yeah, so I think you are more busy, but it also means you can work in spurts, right? So it means you can be really hyper productive. And then if you want to take a break, you can, because I do stuff like that. But the point is that actually, I think you're more productive because you can do the stuff you want to do that is creative, as opposed to, let me fix this code. What's the syntax of this again? Like that type of stuff, right? It's like in the kitchen.
More fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you cook, right? Like it's like you love to cook, but then you have to clean up, right? Well, the agent can do all the cleaning up for you. They can prepare all the food and they can chop everything up for you. But actually, you can put the ingredients together, you can frame it together, you make it look nice, you can experiment next time this way, this time that way. That's essentially what agents are doing for us.
The final question shall still be in that frame. Okay, people obviously are going to have agents and all that, so we might be a lot busier, but we might focus on more creative, fun
I think we'll be happier.
things.
We're
going to be happier. Okay, 5 years to go, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be happier. What shall we prepare for right now? Somebody talks about study math instead of coding. Somebody says, okay, go into history and learn psychology. Somebody says, forget about all that, nothing matters, just go and build your agent from ground up because, how can we prepare for that horizon 5 years down the road?
I think it's never been more important to be a student of social sciences and liberal arts, because those are the soft arts, as it were. Hard sciences, and look, it's always good to know math and it's always good to know physics and sciences if that's what you want. However, an agent will be able to do a lot of that much faster and more efficiently. But if you wanted to make a new math discovery, you still need to be great at math. But let's face it, only a small number of the world have that capacity. But I think for most people, being sort of understanding the world. So I think philosophy, even psychology, what is ultimately philosophy, for instance? I mean, philosophy is really trying to understand humans, right, from its fundamental nature. And what is economics? At the end of the day, I know that many economists like to think that it's like a science. It is not, right?
It's not how it works in practical terms.
It's not how it works.
It's all very emotional.
Exactly. It's actually driven by human nature. And so in many ways, economics is a philosophy of sorts, right? Whether you believe in Keynesianism or you believe in Chicago school, Austrian school, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the reason we don't agree is because we all have different belief systems and we have also different ways in which the world would work. Fundamentally, we won't, I think, find the ultimate formula because I don't believe humans are computational. Like, I don't think we are replaceable. There's some people, I think Jeffrey Hinton basically is sort of making this point around how, we'll be railroaded by AI because essentially we are like computers, which I don't believe in, right? And this is a different topic for another day maybe. But, if you make that assumption, then what is it that is most precious to us? It's what makes us human. And it basically is about sort of empathy, feeling, understanding us as humans. And that's why history and philosophy and social science is so critical when an AI can do everything else for you much more efficiently. Then you can start solving the really big problems, because ultimately the big problems are those in nature, if you think about it. Everything, all the big problems in the world today
physical
is problems around actually the social sciences. Whether it's inequity, whether it's fairness, whether it's justice. It's not about solving math. I mean, math is important. It helps us build technology around this. But if we solve new paradigms in math, it won't make most of the world feel better about stuff, right? But if we can make the world fairer, it will. And that is not a formula. That is understanding humans, and that's social sciences.
Social sciences. We all shall immediately jump on that topic and continue learning, because we only have 5 years. The clock is ticking.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I think we're leaving this meeting knowing a lot more about the future, knowing a lot more about Web3 and Web4. We are ready for agents to come, and let's go get them, guys. Thank you so much, Yat Siu.
Thank you for having me.